Hey everyone, welcome to the reference guide. Once again, this guide won't be covering any content. It is solely used as a reference for talents, rotations, and spells needed as a paladin tank. Let's go ahead and get started. First off, let's touch base on talents. It's important to remember that at whatever point in the game you are watching this, that you will be able to use this talent build, and it will give you a lot of flexibility during dungeons, questing, and eventually raiding once you get to that point. This build is something that I have formulated and crafted myself over the past 2 months while I was leveling up my Paladin as a tank. I started tanking during the Deadmines, and I'm still tanking to this day in Upper Blackrock Spire and other high-level instances. The reason why I made this build was to allow me to be able to just equip gear and go heal or tank at a moment's notice and be viable in either role. I'm going to put up a picture of what this build looks like. It is a 31-14-6 talent split among all three sides of the tree. The first thing that you might be thinking is that it seems counterintuitive to be tanking with Deep Holy, but one thing I've learned is that the shotgun and tank spec is something that a lot of people in the higher level brackets just don't utilize. I have tried Prot spec 2 times, once when I was 51 and the next time when I was 60. I hated it both times, and majority of that comes down to the fact that I didn't have Holy Shock. Holy Shock unlocks the ability for Paladin to be able to range pull, which is something they do not have in their base kit. In addition to that, you do have the ability to have a critical shock every 2 minutes, which you can use for a lot of good boss encounters. It's really good as an opener, and you can even use it sometimes as a taunt to get an enemy off a party member. Next up, we're going to go over the spell rotations, but before we get into that, I want to cover what spells you can expect to use as a Paladin tank. Keep in mind, this guide is for lower levels and higher levels, so I'm going to be putting out the levels that you learn each spell at. First off, we have Blessing of Protection, or Bot. This is learned at level 4. We have Hammer of Justice, learned at level 8. Judgment, learned at level 4. Seal of Righteousness, which is learned at level 1. Retribution Aura, which you can learn at level 16. Consecration, learned at level 20 from the Holy Tree. Righteous Fury, learned at level 16, and Seal of Wisdom, which you learn at level 38. One thing you might notice right off the bat are the number of abilities, even at the lower level, that a Paladin tank will have to learn to manage and use. Don't let this scare you away, since some of the rotations and spells are actually very easy to use, and they flow very nicely during all encounters. Trash pulls, unexpected pulls, or even during the boss encounters. Before you even begin the instance, make sure that you have your Retribution Aura up, because this is a key aura that you need to use as a tank. When you pair it with Righteous Fury, which is another spell that you'll need to use, it just helps kind of stack up your threat passively, just from the mobs hitting you, because every time that they hit you, when you have the aura up, it deals a small amount of holy damage. And with Righteous Fury, it's a buff that you can put on yourself. It increases your threat generated from holy damage by 60%. So between the red aura and whatever you are putting out, that is going to generate a lot of threat and is going to make you viable as a Paladin tank. In addition to this, you will also need Consecration, and that is like the butter of tanking for you. Like, that will ensure that you will hold aggro at least 90% of the time, and if you don't use it, it makes tanking a little bit more difficult. Alright, let's go ahead and get into the spell rotation real quick. When you're going into it, you definitely want to try to use Seal of Righteousness for just trash mobs in general. It does a lot of damage since it scales with your weapon, and each hit deals an additional amount of holy damage. And when it's judged, it deals a large amount of holy damage, so it is perfect for holding and grabbing at different mobs. Consecration, because it's just something you got to use. But this is something that at the lower levels you will actually be more viable to tank as opposed to a warrior, in my opinion, just because you're able to pull a lot of different mobs and you can help your group utilize their AoE potential even from an early level and a end-game level, which is something that is really welcomed by a lot of your party members. Boss pulls. This is something that I still struggle with, just because mana is an issue for Paladins. But what I have learned, the best strat is to help make the pulls go a little bit smoother is to start it off like this. Judge Seal of Wisdom. Use your shock. It can be a crit shock or a normal shock, whatever you feel comfortable with, depending on your plus spell damage gear. Go ahead and judge a Seal of Righteousness, and then just keep Righteousness up and periodically drop a Consecrate until the boss is dead. And that is the simplest way of putting how to tank majority of the boss pools in lower and upper level content. Something else I need to go over really quickly is the hidden taunt ability that paladins have. I discovered this a little bit later, around my level 30 range. Basically, you do have a taunt as a paladin, but it requires timing and close concentration on the threat tables. Here's an example of how it works. Someone in my party has taken aggro from me, but my shocks and my judgments will not be able to put me on top of the threat meter again to get them back on me and hitting me. In this case, I will have to use Blessing of Protection on the person that has aggro. And by doing this, it essentially wipes the person off the threat table. And as long as I am second on the list for the mob's aggro or threat, it will immediately come back to me. But you do have to be careful, since this will render the person unable to attack, and it will remove your blessing on them as well. In addition to this, any CDs that they pop, whether it be a rogue, warrior, mage, or anything like that, it will remove those for them as well. So when you use this, it can waste their CDs. So you have to be a little bit more careful when you use it. But it does essentially work as a taunt, but almost as an indirect taunt. But it requires a lot of coordination on your end, and hoping that the threat table or the threat add-on you have is a bit more accurate. That is essentially it for your reference and breakdown guide. As I go through all of my tanking guides, I will probably refer back to this video, so this is why I made the video first. By doing this, I hope that I can spend less time on the rotations and more on the mechanics and mobs in each instance, so that way you know what you can use in your kit to make the fights go easier. So go out there, get some loot, guys, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.